Concepts with myself, Rachel Patterson, and Pete Roque. Today we're talking about an awesome topic, as we always do, of course, as you know. However, we're talking about the collaborations between police departments and code enforcement and really what that looks like today. So I'm going to let Pete take it away with introducing our very special guest, and very excited to talk to you, sir. Take it away, Pete.
Oh, thank you.
So I had the pleasure of working with Chief Tom DeRay from Garden Grove, California. We formulated this awesome code enforcement and police department programs. They have several units within the police department: the crime prevention unit, uh, the special resource officer unit, and special investigations units. And we always work collaboratively with the police department. And it's my pleasure to introduce Chief DeRay. Chief, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in police work and how you became the chief of police in Garden Grove?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the city. I now that I police. I was in the U. I went to the U.S. Army. Came out really at that point. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I just had a calling to the police department, and so I joined the police department 1990. And worked as a police cadet. Eventually was hired as a police officer in 92 and went through the ranks there. The majority of my time, I've done portions of patrol, but the majority of my time was working undercover in the Special Investigations Unit, as well as the gang unit. I was promoted to sergeant, where again, I was sent back to patrol, but quickly went back to supervise our Special Investigations Unit. And that was in there where I met Pete and his crew. And then from there, I was promoted to lieutenant, within 2 years, captain, and then another 2 years to chief of police of our city.
Oh, impressive, good sir. I mean, you mentioned being in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
That's awesome.
And one of the things with the collaboration. So code enforcement at one time was housed under the police department, and code enforcement, like in many jurisdictions, they hop around from place to place because code enforcement is such a big spectrum of assignments that there's really no real home for them. So they bounce from the police department to community development to housing, public works, city admin, so all over the place. And they were housed under the police department for some time. But I think in the scope of everything, a lot of times when certain code enforcement units land in police departments, they're not really equipped to handle like building violations, or because for the most part, police fall under the penal code and things like that. So so they take on assignments like parking enforcement or animal control, or those types of assignments. So the story with our relationship with code enforcement and the police department was, this was before I came along. Our chief building official actually did a lot of marijuana dispensaries. And can you talk a little bit about that, Chief?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, this was one of the things I was dealing with as the sergeant inside of our narcotics unit. So they were illegal in our city. We watched this throughout California, really in Orange County. We were getting hit hard, and especially in our city in Garden Grove. At one point, I believe we had about 66 illegal marijuana dispensaries. So my crime rate was just skyrocketing. I was having takeover robberies, burglaries at night, you name it, we were having it. So all we did, I mean, we went straight police work. I mean, we were doing search warrants like nobody's business. So for me, it's difficult. I'm going, wait a minute, you're taking my guys away. We're doing search warrants on marijuana dispensaries. And it was just nonstop. We probably did close to 60, 70 search warrants a year. This was going on for multiple years. And we tried at some point to get code enforcement involved, but we just didn't have the I think the buy-in at the time. And, um, Pete talks about our chief building official, David Dent, and Pete came on, and I got to tell you, that's where the collaboration really started, and that's where we started to see some huge successes. We had, and I'll just paint a picture for you. We had a multi-complex commercial building, kind of run down with, I think Pete, maybe 12 to 15 suites in it. Overrun. This was LA, Los Angeles gangs that were operating the dispensaries in this area. Every one of these suites was a marijuana dispensary. We had hit it multiple times. They had a pretty high-powered attorney that specialized in suing the police departments for the raids on these medical marijuana dispensaries. And I think the first time we worked with code enforcement and the building officials, just with Pete and David, we went in there and they came in behind us, and we found so many violations. Well, they did. I don't know what the violations are, so this is why I need you. And we were able to. They red tagged the entire complex. So, we're like, what does that mean? And they're like, look, no one can go in there. And on this municipal code that we have in Garden Grove, you cannot enter at once they post that. So we did that night. We went back out. Our patrol officers went back out. We arrested over 35 individuals inside this complex, and we're trying to get it running again, because that's how it was. We hit them. We take all their marijuana. We're running out of space to save it or to store it. And they would be back operating like we never hit them with the same amount of marijuana within an hour.
Wow.
So this attorney, I will tell you, the attorney that was representing them, again, he had some where he was handling some big federal cases as well. He had nothing. It was great because he couldn't defend the building code violations. He couldn't defend any of it. And they went away. Within a week, they were gone. And that dilapidated building was just vacant. And then we just started going through and hitting all of them. I'll tell you, today we have zero marijuana dispensaries in our city.
Wow.
So great job, Pete.
That's awesome. That has to do something for your crime level if it spiked during that time period.
Yeah, look, the majority of ours in our city and in some neighboring towns is majority of them are run by gangs, or they're not medical whatsoever. They're to enhance and finance the street gangs. So, we saw a lot of that, and yes, our crime it went down. But we also had some cities neighboring us that legalized and basically legalized and put a max on how many they had in their city. We don't. So we don't have any in our city.
And for those watching, the major violations for building codes are change of use. That's one. Egress. A lot of times everything's blocked off, so people don't break in, and they end up sealing the people inside. So, and they build like pretty much quasi cages. A lot of times with marijuana grows, you may have illegal electrical with a lot of plumbing that creates a fire hazard. So these are some of the tools that one needs to use when using the building code. And a lot of times I've seen jurisdictions, I've been in other jurisdictions when we use injunctions, and those typically take a little bit longer, like Chief said. But when it comes to life and safety, those are immediate risks that we can mitigate right away and get people out of there. And yeah, our code does say you cannot enter on an unsafe to occupy building, and that's a great tool. And people get the message, and and then we hold the owner responsible to say, hey, this is your property; it needs to come into compliance, and you need to do it now. And a lot of times they don't know that. Well, they do know, but a lot of times they say they don't know that the marijuana dispensary was there. But it's a great tool, and it's really fast and efficient, right, Chief?
Oh yeah. And I'll tell you, this expanded. So For us in our city, I mean, we're just kind of unusual, right? We have a lot. Every city has their own little quirks, little different crime, everything. Well, we we started having a lot of gambling houses. Back in probably 2010, 2011, we have coffee shops in our Vietnamese area, and we had gambling machines in there. And I was instructed by the police chief at the time, get them all out. So we ended up hitting all of our coffee shops on search warrants. We had houses, everything else. We were taking these gambling machines out. And we're like, what are these? I think we seized like 150,000 cash out of one coffee shop, but we found that we were having a real problem. So we did that, and we came up with the municipal code that you couldn't have any gaming devices or amusement devices inside these coffee shops, because we were getting a lot of complaints from relatives. Hey, my husband just spent all his money at this place, blah, blah, blah. So what we saw is they moved from the coffee shops, and these were all run by Asian organized crime. They moved them into homes. So they would start renting homes inside of a community. Picture a drug house, you're getting the complaints, things like that, of cars coming and going. We were having shootings, we were having robberies. I mean, you name it, we were having it inside of our city. And so we expanded onto that. And we would go in and also look at these homes that were kind of modified and everything else. And code enforcement was able to help us out, and they would be gone. The moment we went in and we did a search warrant and we red tagged it, they were gone. They didn't come back. In fact, what we're seeing now is it was so successful that they will not come into our city to set up these gambling places, and they'll go into the neighboring cities because they don't do anything. So if you go heavy enforcement, you can do all the search warrants you want, is what I found, right? It's just a waste of paper sometimes. Here in California, you really don't get anything for a misdemeanor. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but we saw this as a way to just push it out. So the problem we don't have anymore. We also use them on our prostitution massage parlors that we had in our city. That, I mean, we had some. I've hit probably 50 times on a search warrant, and they would never leave, because what they do is the property owner will say that they don't know that they're operating like that, but instead of the rent, where they're getting $2,500 to $3,000, they're actually getting $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month to allow them to operate, and they won't kick them out. And then the moment we were red tagged based on the modifications that they would make in there that were unsafe, they were gone. So we only have pretty much legal ones now. We will get the occasional illegal one, but those are quickly shut down. So it's just been great. It was a great partnership. I mean, from a police standpoint, we were not successful. We don't have the tools. So when we developed that partnership with code enforcement, that's when everything changed for our city. Everything.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of big picture things were able to come to fruition. That collaborative effort between code enforcement and the police getting these larger issues, certainly awesome. What would you suggest as the chief of police for, we talked a little bit about in the beginning about not a lot of departments, or we'll say police departments, necessarily want or understand code enforcement. So kind of bringing it all the way back to the beginning, what do you suggest? How do you go about talking to a community development manager or talking to building to bring those services within your department?
So we had them in our department. We had code. I mean, Pete talked about it. I will tell you, the first thing I will say is leadership. The leadership from a code enforcement aspect is key. They were under us, but we just didn't have, because we brought them in. We wanted to use them for a community policing aspect to kind of work on a lot of things. But what we saw is we didn't have the leadership on that side, hence why they were moved back to City Hall. But if you get the individuals in there, and it might only be one or two code officials that make that initial relationship with the police department, but that's key. And that's what happened here. it wasn't. It was one or two individuals. It was David and Pete, and our relationship with them was brought in. We could see what they could do. I mean, they came in and said, "Hey, this is what we can offer. We see that you guys have been doing this. This is what we can offer." And the moment we saw, because with police department, we're very we got to see action oriented. And it was, man, they came in and the first thing, we're like, we've been trying to get rid of these people for over a year, and they got rid of them in one day. We're like, okay, you guys are our new best friends, So I'm telling you, it's a lot of it is leadership. It's leadership within the code enforcement. It's leadership within the police department as well.
Right.
And one of the things that I would always recommend is, it's not a credit thing, because at the end of the day, if you're looking for that credit, it's, what, it should be a team. The city of Garden Grove did this. It shouldn't be the police department or code enforcement. It's always about, what, we got the job done. We work collaboratively. Same word. Okay, we work together to get this thing done. And my first when I came in, the weed dispensary stuff was going on, and I just piggybacked on that. And bringing in other tools that I had from other jurisdictions and presenting them to the chief. That was the key, that for him to understand what we were doing and how we're doing it. And they were very hands off. What we did ask them, and they were so awesome. And we had we just had a great partnership where I'm like, hey, I need PD here at this date. I need PD here. They were always responding. I mean, their support for us is what made us safe. We normally wear polo shirt and slacks, and sometimes they PD were like, hey, why are you in your church clothes? But at the end of the day, they went in there, cleared out the apartments, cleared out the houses, cleared out the lots. We had to work with transients. They were right there. I mean, there was a lot of issues that we police and code enforcement handled. Transients on private property, the illicit motels. I mean, I can go on, and it's just that partnership that we have. The homeless encampments. I mean, it's just goes on and on. And Chief, I know a little bit of the makeup of Garden Grove. Can you talk about a little bit about the different units that you have, like SIU, the community improvement folks, and the special resources team?
Yeah, so I have a specialty division that I have our gang unit that's really just focuses on gang suppression and some of the follow up there and investigations involving gangs. Special investigations unit, we primarily handle narcotics, vice. I mean, we'll handle anything, organized crime, anything that's of a political nature. We have our traffic bureau. We have our crime prevention. I have a special resource team, which is our 4-person homeless team, where we try to get them services, but I'll be honest with you, 98% of the people don't want anything, so we arrest them for things. We're heavy enforcement. But yeah, I mean, it's sporadic records, dispatch, just like all the other police departments. But really, the specialty units were some of the primary ones that worked with our code enforcement. Am I missing one, Pete, that you want me to hit on?
No, and it's like you said, sometimes it gets problematic, and the leadership in those units would reach out to us saying, hey, we need you to join us on this warrant, because we know it's going to be one of those cases. One of the other things that Chief allowed us to do was go in there and educate during every shift on what it is that a normal patrol person can call us on and say, hey, we give them a presentation. If you see this, you need to call us. If it's a problem property and you see this, you need to call us. And you know what? And I did give my personal number to them, and guess what? My phone blew up. Like, I was like, oh, shucks, I should have given my work number. But all in all, I made very good friends with a lot of the police officers, and you know what? They all have the same mission. They care about their city. They care about their police department, and it's just admirable to see that, they look at us like they don't look at us like, lesser law enforcement. They just look at us another tool that they have. And I think that's where that's where it differs, because I always say we're not police officers. I always say, you know what, when you have a code enforcement officer that thinks they're a police officer, tries to act with that sense of authority, you get a lot of problems sometimes where you're mouthing off to some gang member, and officer safety, it just becomes an issue. So one of the things I say, hey, we need to be community partners. The city of Garden Grove does have a great community policing outreach program, with Kelly Hahn, and and I mean, they just go out there. They actually included code enforcement in their Citizens Academy now, which wasn't done before. They invite us to National Night Out, where we can go out there and promote the craft of code enforcement and educate. And believe it or not, people will come into your booth and just start complaining about the neighbors. So where they're just taking complaints, which is cool, but end of the day, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, so Chief, is there any? Let me see. One of the things that we always say what I tend to say to folks is like, the police officers sometimes take care of the bees, and we take care of the hive. The home. And I think that's such a great partnership. I mean, we've gone out to locations where I don't think I would have ever experienced what I experienced if it would not have been for the police department to say, hey, you need to come look at this. And I go over there, and there's like the craziest modifications of electrical wires in the backyard. You have people living in tents. I mean, you have kids back there. It's just, you see some crazy, gnarly stuff that PD sees. And for police departments across the nation, sometimes, a lot of times police officers don't have the foresight to call code enforcement and say, hey, this is an issue. Can you come over? I mean, that needs to happen more often, and you reduce the amount of crime that happens.
Right. It's about having that partnership and that leadership, though, having that understanding from both parties that you need each other. It's a beautiful partnership. So like Renee says, working with the PD is absolutely essential. And if there's a disconnect with the PD, it's a safety issue. I would have to absolutely agree with you, Renee. I work fully uniformed in a police department where you really have to be able to count on the information you're being provided, whether it's coming to you from dispatch with priors on the property. Certain people you need to be worried about. Typically when you're in your church clothes, like Pete said, you're going up to these houses without that information, without that. Sometimes it's key, sometimes it's not. I joke all the time about we can do what we do with the smile on our face and the words coming out of our mouths, not our badges. So it's really just dependent on that situation. So having that really good collaborative working relationship is extremely important. So I agree with you. And not just on the bigger, issues, the parlors and the marijuana, but just the basic officer contacts, trying to get information from somebody, knowing that you have an officer there to back you up if you need them is definitely important. So thank you, Renee.
So, Chief, one of the things that some of our audience may want, because they're looking at this as an example of what we were able to do. So,
Sure.
For a code manager, what's the best way you think for them to approach, like a colleague, fellow police chief, and say, hey, how do we partner? How do we do this? Because I've been in jurisdictions where code enforcement doesn't communicate with the police department. And to me, that's a disservice to that community. So how does a code department outreach to, how does one kind of make that connection? Your opinion?
I think it's a lot of kind of what we did, where I think, it's not so much that the chief, like with Lisa, we have a great relationship. The director of that division and myself, we have a great relationship. Where the relationship really blossomed was more at the officer sergeant level. And that's where it came in, because as a sergeant, I'm going to the chief and to the captain kind of saying, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try this. This is what codes, is saying that they can do. And I think when you start seeing results is when you're going, wow.
Mhm.
because a lot of things, I mean, even right now, a lot of things are in between code and PD,
Right.
parking issues. I mean, you name it. So for me, if I can take some of that off them, because I'll tell you, like in our city right now, it's code that gets bashed more than the PD,
Mhm.
which I'm shocked. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because we have here in California the ADUs, we have you know, this is where they can, you know, yeah, California comes up with these laws that, I mean, you can build structures, you know, in the backyard if you can fit it, if it's within so many square feet, and it's like,
You can fit
yeah.
four now. Four now. Yeah.
uh,
Just
so
pack it in
this
there.
is going to, yeah, so this is going to interact with code and PD, because not only are we going to see, we're seeing massive parking issues now. We're watching our community just explode,
Mm.
and there's nowhere to park. And then you have all these, you know, you have 12 cars at a house now. You have them concreting the entire property. So, you know, getting back to what you're asking, Pete, I don't know that it comes from the chief. It really, it's, when we look at it, it's kind of the blue collar, the working, that relationship starts there. That, listen, I can tell my sergeants, look, hey, get a relationship with code and do this, right? And we know how they are, you know, and not to say that, but they're kind of like, why? We got our own job, we got our stuff to do.
Mhm.
But once we saw that and we saw the effects and we built that personal relationship, we were off to the races, because they could call me and whatever they needed, I got them. You know, hey, you need a police car out there, you got it. No questions asked. So, I mean, we got to the point where they had cell phones of sergeants that were working, officers that were working, and they pop out, boom, and get things done. So we were very action oriented, both units, but the personal relationship started at that level, the lower level.
So, Chief, do your code enforcement officers work in conjunction with your watches? So, like in my police department, there's watch 1, 2, and 3, and I'm on watch 1. Is that kind of how it works? The makeup in your department in particular?
No, because I mean, code enforcement is in City Hall, which is right
Okay.
across the street from the police department. So we don't do that. I mean, they work daytime. You know, code enforcement's daytime hours. So a lot of my specialty units are daytime hours. My narcotic guys, they come in at about noon. With great hours, huh? But then all the other ones are there, so
Okay.
they have access to all that during the day.
Okay. Makes
And
sense.
one of the things that is unique about Garden Grove is we actually put out a weekend officer, and I think we have a weekend. We had a person that was just, we didn't assign them to PD, but if PD needs something, they're trained more to service PD issues. So if you know, they get a call at 8 p.m., that person rolls out at 8 p.m. and says, okay, is it, you know, we, and it's funny because I'm not even in Garden Grove. Sometimes I get a call, hey, what do you think? I'm like, well, I would check with the building official, but you know, but I know what the building official is going to say. So because you know, and I would give him my 2 cents. You know, uh, like I love the city of Garden Grove. I would never left if not for this great opportunity. Like I'm getting paid to be here today. So you know, it's a I can't I can't knock it, but that model that we built in city of Garden Grove is such a great model. I mean, the my first task force that I had with the police department, we went after some of these unsavory motels. I mean, you had prostitution, drug activity, in-ops. We went in there. We basically, you know, the motels, you're not allowed to be there for less than 28 days, and we had people that were there for years. You know, so we did our enforcement. People had to move out or move rooms. We had the property owner clean up that property. It was clean for about a year,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah,
it, you know, just like you know, just if you don't stay on top of it, it comes back. And this is the one
right.
key that you have to continue to stay on top of this stuff. You just have to do it.
Right.
Mhm.
It's right back.
Let me see. So we had let's consider. Let me see. Okay, and I hope in those of you. Okay, so we had a quick question. And any other insights you have for any code divisions out there that may or may not have that relationship with their PD?
I would just say, try to develop it as best you can. I know a lot of it's just, the personal contact, or even having the ability to have someone in the PD or code enforcement meet. Sometimes we have those barriers, but I would make every effort. I mean, just the success that we had here in our city made a huge impact for our community members, and it's the people that live there that are really feeling the burden of it. We talked, Pete talked about the dilapidated motels. These were in the residential community areas right around that were just bringing in individuals that were meth labs. We had cocaine labs. We had everything going on in there, and we were able to kind of clean that up. And they move on, right? They find another hotel. But Pete's right. If you don't stay on top of it, it will come back. But I just think that you just try to get in there, try to make that contact. I'm telling you, once I think the police department sees what building officials can do, and what code enforcement can do, and what a benefit it is, they're going to be seeking you out even more and more and more. Like Pete said, he still gets calls.
Yeah, I think it's very accurate, with both of you talking about the marijuana industry, and really when that blew up here in Colorado, those partnerships really changed with the municipalities, police departments, so on and so forth. With, code enforcement officers have that little bit of knowledge in every part. And then having that support with the police, you solve a whole problem, not just the nuisance issue or not just the criminal issue, but it's a whole partnership of solving problems.
Yeah, and you do get those calls from council, and sometimes I sat on some of these email threads, and I'm like, chief's like, oh, I'm gonna get an officer out there. I'm like, hey, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Or sometimes it's for us, and
Right.
PD will say, hey, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. And it becomes kind of like that. Okay, who could handle this easier? And I think that because like if somebody's complaining about vendors, okay, I'm more equipped for vendors, but let's say something goes down, I'd say, hey, I might want a police officer there, just to keep the peace. When we serve any type of warrant, PD always, the thing about Garden Grove, they're really good about having briefings beforehand for officer safety issues. We have briefings and say, okay, this is what's going on. This is how we're going to go. We're part of that whole operation, which is awesome. We have police radio say, okay, it's clear, come on in. We go in, we handle our business. If we need a red tag, we red tag and then move on our merry way. And then we take care of it and just keep PD, to say, hey, if you see something there, give us a call, and have them arrested for trespassing. And we were able, I think when we were there, we were able to demolish about maybe 18 structures that were just bad. I would say drug houses. They were really, really bad, where the walls were soaked with like meth remnants. And so us being able to clear those lots that were issues for 10, 15, 20 years. I can think the one I know the audience isn't going to know this, but the house on Orangewood, which is a long-standing problem. It's just a vacant lot now. So we try to do that and use other tools like receiverships or administrative citations, where some of these property owners have to take action, or we take our legal recourse. So that's a whole other tool. And one thing that we also were able to do was do some cost recovery, because if we're doing some let's say a receivership and we constantly have PD go out there, we jot down every single hour that they're out there. That way the city can recoup those costs, because it's not fair for all the taxpayers to pay for one property owner's chaos that they're causing. So those are good tools to have. So, but Chief, we really appreciate you. And I can't think of a better partnership that I had. I was in other jurisdictions, we had great partnerships, but I don't think we ever had the backup that we had. I had a great relationship with the late Lieutenant Reynolds. I mean, he was
Oh yeah.
the awesomest guy in that he goes, what do you need? How do we get you this? How do we, I mean, this guy would offer us tools. He wouldn't, we didn't have to ask him. He would just say, hey, I have this. Do you want to do this? I'm like, okay, be part of this community thing. I'm like, okay, cool. And there's always a give and take. So, I really appreciate all the stuff that the Garden Grove Police Department, does for code enforcement and for their community. And yes, you are right. We do get bashed more on Facebook than you guys do.
It's
But
a
it's
shock.
important. It's important for folks like yourself, Chief, to keep fostering that relationship. So thank you from, over here on this side, getting other chiefs and the next people in line to understand that these relationships are so important and they have to continue. Thanks for being a part of that as well.
Great. Thank you.
And so we really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us. And let me see, we have a couple of people saying thank you, and it's just great to hear from some police personnel, especially in the highest level, saying, hey, code enforcement works, and we
Oh,
that partnership works. So thank you. And if
it does.
everybody, this is Chief DeRay from City of Garden Grove. Awesome city. I mean, I love it, but I'm not there anymore.
We won't plaster your information all over the show to contact you, we promise.
But
Well, you guys, yeah.
if anybody
Look,
has any questions, you can contact me. I'm at proque@fourleafink.com. Chief DeRay, he's contact him at the police department. So that's
Yeah,
I
thank
really
you for your
appreciate you.
service.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and it's great to talk to everybody. And as much as I can always promote that relationship, I think it's huge. I'll leave you with this, that the work that we did in Garden Grove with code enforcement in regards to the marijuana dispensaries went throughout Southern California, because I was getting calls and having meetings with San Bernardino County. And they're coming to us like, what did you guys do? They were having warehouses full of marijuana. I mean, just absolutely incredible. And when we started to explain, it was like, wow. And they were like, well, we'll make an offer to your code enforcement official right now. We're like, no, you're not taking them. So it's so important, and it's nice to share, and it's such a great tool for the police department to have. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks for being here with us.
And one thing to building officials out there, don't be scared to red tag. You have a lot of building officials that will not red tag. If it meets the minimum criteria, it's eligible for it. So, and if somebody's going to get injured or hurt because of that, don't be scared. Code enforcement, yes, it's a lot of writing, but it's valuable.
Well, then that's the same thing. You work together to bring resolution, whether it's with the police department, building, and code. You just all work together.
So I will say that we actually tried to red tag before we had this partnership with code, and the building official would refuse to do it. And so it just took so many more man hours from the city. And then until we had someone that could come in and was confident saying, no, this is it, that's when everything took off.
I would
agree.
So
thanks again for having me. And you guys take care.
Thank you, Chief.
All
right, everybody.
Thank you.
For joining us as well.
Bye.
Andre, Renee, Cece, Minnie, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye.